Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Excited to have you. In our last session, we talked about discipling in grace and truth. In this session, we're going to talk about how to connect people to their next step. So we're here with Pastor Nate, our connections pastor. He's going to share a little bit more about how to connect people to their next step. Basically, what we want to know, or what we want to teach you guys about this phase, is that first of all, this last step is a one meeting with the person you're meeting with. It should happen kind of in that last meeting together. It's really, really important for them to see the value of the relationship that you have with them. You've spent a lot of time with them already, pouring into them, hearing their story, and now's the time where you can kind of help guide them to that next step. It's not ultimately to prescribe to them their next step. The main goal is that you help them to come up with what they believe their next step is going to be. Just like people heal from injuries at different phases and different a series in time. Ultimately, same thing happens with people that are walking through emotional difficulties. They're going to need to have different steps that they want to go through. One person might jump into serving and they feel like that's the next thing for them. The other person might be extremely hesitant and even have a hard time connecting to a connect group. So it's your job as someone who's built relationship with them over time to help them determine what God is kind of speaking to them as their next step. The main thing too is you want to make sure that they know that continued change and continued growth happens in community. And so getting them involved in community is super, super important. In Hebrews 10:24 through 25, it says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another." And so continuing to encourage them that life and growth is going to continue for them in their life in a sense of community. So basically, you're asking them to kind of take a next step in their life. So this phase, like I said before, is basically to help them recognize what God's calling them to do next. So Pastor Nate is going to talk about some of those options, and yeah.
Well, obviously, don't know the mind of God because you could call them somewhere else, right? But just some practical things that they could do at Evangel that God could be calling them to do. Uh, Obviously, the very first one that I would say for anybody is our Discover course. Discover, like, let's say, like, you just, like, hey, I don't know what a good next step is, and you forget. When in doubt, say Discover. Discover is basically designed, it's a course designed, 4 sessions, to help people get to their next step. And so if you send them to Discover, they can come the very last Sunday of every month, and it's from 1:30 to 4:30, or they can take Discover online, goevangel.org/discover. They can sign up for it. But basically, I'll teach them everything they need to know about the church and leave it up to them what they want to do. Again, just like kind of Pastor Alicia was saying, let them kind of decide. But once they know the options, they can do that. Some other specific, maybe practical next steps would be, first off, I always like to say Alpha to people because Alpha is exploring the Christian faith. It's understanding, it's really discipling people from a baby or maybe someone that's gone through hurt and trauma and stuff like that into what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And that's a good thing. So we do those every trimester. We'll be having an alpha. So just go to goevangel.org/groups and you can find that there. Another option, let's say maybe they've been a part of the faith for a while, is that you can just plug them into a connect group. We have connect groups of different ages, different gender demographics. Obviously, there's only male and female, but so we have young adult ones for 18 to 30. We have men groups. We have female groups. We have some married couple groups. So again, pointing to goevangel.org/groups, and there's a way that they can find some community there as well. Also, I mean, maybe they went through whatever the program is with you. Maybe they're in a life course, but you could also send them to a different life course if they're different life-specific challenges. So, I mean, we have divorce care, grief share, Financial Peace University.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I know them all off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, specific needs for specific challenges and stuff like that. So another thing, let's say they need a little more care. There's only so much you can do as an individual. Then you have to send them off to professional counseling. And so we have a list of recommended people that you can get from either Pastor Alicia or stop by the main office and they'll hook you up with that. And then there's just some that are just very obvious next steps. Let's say someone just gave their life to Jesus. You should encourage them to make a decision to get water baptized. Or someone just heard, they start talking about their money situations. Maybe encourage them to start trusting God with tithing. And so just seeing where they're at, or maybe they're like ready to get involved in the church at a higher capacity. Get them to sign up for a partnership or go through Discover. And yeah, so just let them decide, just present them the options.
Yeah, it's all about helping guide them to what they feel like their next step is. Also, remember, this should not come out of the blue. After your fourth meeting or so with them, you should remind them that this is a relationship that does come to an end. Prepare them and set the tone prior to this meeting so they know it's coming, they can be processing it. It's not something that's going to completely throw them off and that kind of thing. Be asking them to pray about what God is calling them to do next and what He's preparing them to do. So ask them about the why. Help them to determine and distinguish their motivation behind the next step. Why is that the next thing that they feel like God's calling them to do? And remember how much courage it takes for them to make this next step. It's not something that ultimately people sometimes feel super comfortable doing on their own. So support them through it, help them to walk through that. And the last thing, recognize that God is in control. You have done your best in meeting with this person and being relational with them. Your job is to care and not control. And so just make sure that you are reminding yourself even that God ultimately holds them in His hands. And so thank you so much for being willing to go through this training process, for being willing to be God's instrument and walking with people and helping to bear their burdens. Remember to take a look at the reflection questions in the end of this section, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.